listening to Inclusive AF with Jackie Clayton and Katee Van Horn.
All right, welcome. This is Katee Van Horn with the Inclusive AF podcast. My sidekick Jackie is not able to join today, but I do have some amazing guests who are joining me. We're going to have a great conversation on all the things. So, welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast, Sarah and Sophia. So glad you could join us. And Sophia, why don't you kick us off and share a little about who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
Of course. Thanks for having us. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. My name is Sophia Whelan, and I am one half of the co-founders of an amazing company that Sarah and I started called Horizon Human. Our tagline is strategic HR advisors, but I think we are more than that. We are your secret weapon. We can be your, uh, speak real. We can be your, do everything, roll up our sleeves, wherever it may be. My background is really pretty deep in consulting. I've spent most of my career in consulting. I started with Deloitte Consulting in London, moved then to New York, and then spent some time in-house at JP Morgan in our HR strategy team, leading digital strategy. So a little hint, my focus has always been on HR transformation, and my sort of passion or my objective is to just make the HR function as impactful and as possible. And that's continues to evolve, and it looked a little different maybe 15 years ago than it does today.
Yes.
And I do believe like right now is also, a real amazing moment to be in the HR world. I'm just sort of starting to shape this idea that HR really now has a bigger responsibility than ever in really shaping work for the future as we have AI and other things coming in. So I look forward to speaking more about that during the podcast. But yeah, so my role really spans with our clients right now from shaping HR strategy, shaping AI strategy, helping clients think about how to approach AI, how to get ready for AI, and more. And then on the personal side, I recently just relocated back to my native Sweden. And so I live in Sweden right now with my family. I have three kids, 10, 8, and 4, and my British husband.
Awesome. Very cool. I was trying to catch the accent
Yeah.
where
Yeah. It's
Which-
been it's been this side of the Atlantic, other side of the Atlantic. So
Yes.
it's sort of it's ever evolving as well.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you and welcome, Sophia and Sarah.
Hi, thanks again for having us, Katie. Really appreciate it. I'm the other half of the founding partners for Horizon Human. We actually founded Horizon Human as a way to look at staying human in the world of HR transformation. Our hashtag has always been be human, and it's something that we really believe in, which is that as HR is being impacted so mightily by major transformation forces like budget, technology, business process change, regulatory change around the globe, that it's really important to retain the essence of building a trust-based and impactful organization, serving the rest of your company and making sure that your businesses can deliver the best they possibly can. My background is deep in TA. I have run global TA functions at companies like Hilton, Accenture, and then at JP Morgan Chase. My last role at JP Morgan Chase, I was actually responsible for all of the TA technology and product for a very large talent acquisition organization. I spent a lot of time on AI during my time there, and was a great experience, phenomenal learning experience. But as we founded Horizon Human, it became very clear to us that the need to coach HR leaders on the intersection of technology, business process, and people was really important. We're at an inflection point for all the reasons that I mentioned. And I spend most of my time on sort of TA transformation, which is happening every day all around us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just had the opportunity to be at the HR Tech conference last week in Las Vegas. And I'm pretty sure every single booth had something on their banner and on their
Oh
marketing
yeah.
materials around AI.
For
So
sure.
would love to start there and kind of, I know there's a lot going on, especially in the EU around AI and, some regulatory pieces going into effect, but would love to just hear, what is your take on the discussion around AI and how people are thinking about AI in HR? And I don't know who wants to kick us off on that one.
I can take it. Um, so listen, I think first of all, I like to tell people AI in HR, or at least AI in TA, has been around for a while.
Mhm.
It's not a new topic. It's not something that is new to many senior TA leaders in terms of wrestling with either the ethics or the implementation strategy. It's just gotten more complex, and you've got more voices in the room all of a sudden saying everyone has to be AI, and they're reaching for use cases that seem to hinge, at least initially, on creating efficiencies inside the talent acquisition organization to create savings. I would say that the biggest opportunity for AI has yet to be realized in talent acquisition. I think everyone is very much focused on can it filter resumes and help you find the best applicant faster. And I think that there's a whole bunch of use cases that we're overlooking around candidate experience and hiring manager experience and recruiter experience that actually will probably bring more value with less risk to an organization. That said, knowing that everyone is focusing on that one major use case of get to the best applicant faster, there have been some decisions made. There's been some risk taken. I think there's been some unintentional consequences of product design that talent acquisition organizations are now going to spend a tremendous amount of their time wrestling with. And I think it's going to, if you don't do it right, you could lose trust with your candidates. You could lose trust with your hiring managers. And that is the credibility, that's the currency that talent acquisition operates on. So, I think we're at a really big inflection point for AI and TA. And I don't think anyone's got the silver bullet yet.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think that even though like TA has been on this journey for a long time, the rest of HR has, I wouldn't say like a couple of years ago when the large language models came out, HR sort of wide-eyed and just thought, wow, what an opportunity. What can we make with this? And I think that people got swept away a little too excited by the technology, not actually thinking about thinking enough about the strategy, thinking enough about the implications that it would have on what kind of organization they needed, what type of data they needed to have in place, and go on and on and on. And I think that has, people have gotten smarter. So that has gotten better where I say I see HR teams leading much more with, what's the problem we're trying to solve, getting better at thinking about strategy and not just kind of chasing the shiny technology object. But I think that it has now gone beyond HR, which I find the most interesting. I want to say last year at conferences or even earlier this year, I felt like what was missing from any of the conversations was, but how does this impact the workforce? How does it impact the role of HR? How does it impact our roles, our structure, our operating models? And then you saw news around, they're merging the CIO and the CHRO roles in some organizations, and how does that play down? And I think that AI right now, AI for HR, actually HR needs to take a step back and just understand the impact it's having on the workforce, and then help lead the workforce on a path that's going to enable the workforce to, whichever industry it is, to upskill and to evolve and to develop and to kind of create career opportunities that are human, that are intrinsically going to continue to need human skills. So I think that HR really needs to lean into the human side of the transformation more so, and not worry so much about the technology shiny object. And I think that conversation is just starting.
Absolutely. So, Sarah, you mentioned kind of the ways that AI, like we don't even know yet, kind of how to use AI. And so would love to dig into that. Like, what are those use cases that haven't been thought of yet, or, are not even being considered by HR folks? Because I think, I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think, like I said, most of the things, in HR tech, it was AI, I we were kind of joking about the fact that everyone's doing AI, but it's also but are they really? And do they even know what that means? And all of these things. But what are the use cases that you think about that we should be using or we should be thinking about when it comes to AI?
I think rather than talking about specific use cases, because in my experience, use cases are specific to an organization. My concept of a use case may be appropriate for one org, but maybe not for another. I would rather focus on the concept of really understanding your business, really understanding your process, and recommending that instead of going out and buying a shiny object like AI and an HR product, that you spend the time and spend the money, frankly, doing a real design workshop, understanding every single step in your TA process, mapping time against each of those steps so that you can understand, hey, where is your recruiter fundamentally spending the most time? Are they spending the most time on compensation, going back and forth with compensation for, review and approval, out of scope, et cetera? Are they spending a tremendous amount of time on compiling interview notes for a hiring manager to review? Are they spending a copious amount of time scheduling meetings? And by scheduling, I don't mean that like the actual physical scheduling, but like getting candidates onto a plane, getting candidates into a room, all of those other things. Because there are regulations that we are bumping up against. And the Mobley v. Workday case is, a classic example of where a company with very good intentions of trying to solve a problem in TA may have developed something that could be running afoul of current regulations. We can talk later about how those regulations are probably going to change over time.
Yeah.
But I think that what's really important is that you're investing that time in your organization and you're not going out and looking at a shiny object on an HR tech floor. And I love HR tech. I'm really sad to have missed it this year. But it is, you're buying products that worked for a developer or a product manager's specific use case in their head, as opposed to what works for your organization. And if you're going to be smart about implementing AI, you are going to know ins and outs, the details of everything that is happening in terms of how recruiting gets done inside your organization across the board, all segments, all types of hiring, all regions, so that you can identify what types of tools you actually need that could be AI enabled. And this is like a big bugaboo for me because a lot of the times you do go out and we see people being attracted sort of to that shiny object. Someone has said, test out AI, go build AI, and they're going after the sexy thing, right? And often the sexy thing is the hardest to do. Learn, iterate, grow, learn about building your own, and really delivering a quality experience through that AI implementation um, as opposed to what we've been experiencing, right? Which is AI that has claims that it works, people implement and it doesn't work in their use case, or they implement it and it works, but then they find out that there are challenges on the back end, or they implement it, but they actually don't have the team on the ground that has the know-how to implement it. So it takes 7 months to do something that the vendor promised would take 2 weeks.
Right.
All of those things are what I would say TA leaders should be focusing on and that HR leaders should be focusing on. But avoid the vendor telling you that something has AI and is therefore going to solve a business problem that they know nothing about.
Perfect. I like that. I think that is we did notice there were a few things that, we saw within the tools that we saw last week. And there was one that even I was like, well, that's illegal. So we can't do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
that's probably not a tool we should
That's
invest in or
often my
anyone.
inner talk track.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it was one of those, someone who's never worked in HR and doesn't know any of the legal ramifications of anything or going, hey, you should buy this. It's great. And in theory, it sounds great. But anyhow, um, so when you think about trends, Sophia, in HR, obviously AI is a big one. But can you translate that for me and kind of think about that in terms of how do we also counterbalance that with that, candidate and employee experience, and also think about it in regards to like some of the bias that comes into play around some of these trends that we're seeing and some of these, questions that are being asked or challenges that HR is facing.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot to unpack there, but the so the from an experience perspective, I think I wanted to sort of build a little bit more upon what Sarah said as well, that from an experience, like from an AI perspective, like getting to the problem you're trying to solve and doing that in a way that is legally compliant, even though like those legal requirements are evolving by the day as sort of the that side of the coin is sort of catching up to what's happening with speed in the tech development world. But I do think if you think about the experience, you're able to take a lens of another a different personas across kind of who's interacting in the process, and thereby hopefully starting to see and shine a light on some things that may that may lead to issues from a kind of a equity perspective, or from what questions you're asking. I think that I'm a big fan of human-centric design, bringing sort of end users in at an early stage. And you heard Sarah talk about design. We're just we we have seen that's where the magic happens, that where you can really create value down the road when you spend that time. So using human-centric design, or actually bringing the end users into the design early on, even if it's not design, even if that's not how they're thinking about it, but they're talking about their problems, they're talking about their, uh, the things that are difficult for them day to day. And this is a bit of a tangent away from the talent acquisition question, but to build on this human centric, I have a story that I like to tell. When I was doing design work in preparation for a transformation for a large trucking company, and we brought in the truck drivers into a focus group because the truck drivers were such a critical workforce, obviously, for a trucking company, and they were, losing them. They could see that they were not, they had difficult with retention, they had difficult with, rewarding them, etc. And some of the things that they shared with us would be something that we could have never have done or understood in thinking about what's best practice, what's leading practice, how do we automate, how do we create efficiencies. Like what they really cared about was the fact that from a reward perspective, what made them feel seen was that they used to get turkeys at Thanksgiving, and they didn't get them anymore. And that was just like an eye-opening thing. And that's just from like an example of how powerful it is when you go and you spend the time with the actual end users of a product or of a process or kind of a system that you're trying to put in place, and how much that can influence, and how little small things can really make a big difference. So I think that that's sort of the mindset that we have to bring in as we think about AI, as we think about TA, as we think about equity. Keep the end user at the center at all times.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
Looking for the inside scoop on payroll? Whether you're a payroll pro or just curious about your paycheck, we've got two podcasts you cannot miss. It's About Payroll delivers the latest trends for payroll pros, and It's About Your Paycheck is here for employees, breaking down pay and rights in simple terms. Two great shows, two great hosts, and endless insights to keep you informed and empowered. Subscribe now and elevate your payroll knowledge. Brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets people.
And when you think about, if a team is looking to add in AI or add in different, whether that's a tool, whatever it is to create more efficiency, to create automation, whatever that might be, what are the things that they should be doing? How should they be thinking about evaluating or even figuring out, how do we use this, or how do we think about AI within our team?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's back to what Sarah was saying earlier around understanding like what are the critical friction points that are actually that's creating drag in the process, that's creating drag in your day-to-day work. And those are the opportunities to go after. I think that the sort of if you do that, you're really going to start solving problems, and you're also going to start bringing people along with you. I'm a big sort of change practitioner also, and I think about that as a way of bringing people along and actually driving adoption without having spending the bells and whistles on change management, so to speak, but really driving adoption by solving problems for people. I think that I read somewhere, I think it was Harvard Business Review last year or the year before, that the actual innovation from an AI perspective is happening at the team level, the ground level. So yes, CEOs and the C-suite want to implement effectiveness and they want to, bring in all these tools, but actually the actual innovation and where people are using it is happening within small teams, because it's at that level, at the point of work, that we're going to look for. It's human nature, I think, to look for ways to make it easier, to look for ways to make it better. And I think that's the advice to HR teams as they go in. And it could be, to CHRO, it's like, what's the biggest thing holding your function back? What's the biggest thing that's going to prevent you from, delivering that value to the business? Or it could be, a TA, a recruiter to say, where is your, like, what's preventing you from, being as efficient as possible, or what's creating a bad experience for you today? And that could be anything. Like Sarah mentioned, the different examples. So I do think it's not, it's not brain surgery, brain science. It's just, you just got to go in and you got to talk to people about what their main problems are and see where you can then start applying some AI. And then you have to think about the other side of the coin, like I mentioned earlier. What is it that's then remains with the people, and how can we then create a system in which we are actually upskilling and spending our time creating opportunities for people to sort of continue to grow in those roles and with those skills. I think that's really where HR has a big responsibility and a big role to play.
So when you think about that, you're talking about the front line, and going back to that a little bit, that, the frontline team members are kind of coming up with I, kind of would say, what do we need and how do we need to use this in the right way? Do you have any examples of teams, obviously without giving away any, confidential information, but any examples of how teams have solved problems or figured out ways to use AI to improve the team member experience?
Sure. I mean, I can give
Sarah, you
some,
want to hop in for
yeah, I'll give an example from a former employer, and I won't give too much detail for confidentiality and all of the right reasons, right? But um, we were actually building the first large language model in HR when we were doing this work. And we were partially looking for a use case we could experiment on, right? To understand how the data worked and understand, how swiftly we could move and just sort of get smarter on implementing our own AI inside an organization. But the use case we identified was actually QA on posted job descriptions. So the business process prior had been a role that there was a separate role inside of the recruiting organization that actually QA'd the job descriptions. And I'm not just talking like a Textio job description QA, like, there were over 2,000 banned words that we didn't want having appearing in our job descriptions. We were concerned about bad actors inside of, potentially it was a large recruiting organization. Could someone deliberately put in the wrong word in order to create a flag? How do and it wasn't just about gender and tone per se, but it was really protecting legal risk, reducing legal risk for the organization. Now, the implementation was not perfect in any way, shape, or form. But what it did was it essentially eliminated an entire task for the recruiting organization. The reason that the implementation wasn't perfect is we hadn't figured out how to do QA LLMs inside of the organization that we were in. We had to do it on publicly posted data. So we had to wait for the rec to be posted and then actually review it for all of these banned terms. However, as soon as we did it, we actually were able to start quantifying the amount of time that we were saving the recruiting organization. Was it the most sort of like revolutionary implementation? Absolutely not. But it was a use case, and it was a proof point of what could we do and what couldn't we do based on the limitations we had in front of us. And it was targeting a very specific task that recruiters had to be like, it wasn't just that the recruiters had to do it. It was that a recruiting manager had to follow up and make sure that it happened. That a recruiting manager or a recruiter had to make a checkbox on an Excel spreadsheet to say that it had happened. That the auditors at the end of each year had to check and make sure that it had been done, right? So it was sort of like this, we were solving for a multitude of tasks across the organization. That is an incredibly unsexy use case. Like you could fall asleep talking about it. It is not fun. There is nothing amazing about it. But when you talk to a recruiter, just as Sophia would talk to a truck driver, you talk to a recruiter and you say, like, what's really bothering you, other than like that the HCM that they're working on is too slow, or that they've got too many candidates to go through, both of which are different problems in many different ways. It's administrative tasks. It's death by a thousand cuts. And how do you start to resolve those death by a thousand cuts? By saying, okay, great, let's just not take the offline process and put it online and enable it through AI. Let's remove that process from you. You no longer have to focus on that. Go focus on your candidates.
Right. Right. And I think that's part of it too, is I think, to your point, I think people are looking for the sexy use cases, the
Oh,
sexy
they're being pushed to. I think that
bombshells.
executives are expecting them to bring forward a sexy use case, and HR executives want to go to their CHRO and say, "Hey, I've cut 50% of X inside of HR because I was able to implement this amazing AI. Oh, and by the way, we built it, etc."
Mhm.
They're not ready for it. Even the largest and most sophisticated organizations probably aren't ready to do that.
Okay.
And I want to, I just want to elaborate a little bit on kind of the environment that, because this is when Sarah and I were working together, so I kind of know it well. And the environment that we had created was, an environment where the team was able to do that. They were able to go and experiment on something like that. We had set up the right structure with say it again, with sort of experience focused design with the technology people, with the engineering talent sitting side by side with Sarah as she was leading the product work and to sort of figuring all of that out. So, building it alongside kind of a diverse team. And here I'm talking diversity of skill sets and diversity of sort of roles, as well, an opportunity to work in a little bit in a agile environment. I think that's also not spoken about enough. Like when it comes to implementing AI and making it successful, is that not only do you need the technology, yes, and you need the use case, yes, but you also sort of need the environment where you're able to try and test things out. One other example I have is with a recent client working on implementing a leadership advisor, let's call it. It's not a coach. It's more than a coach. It's sort of a leadership advisor that can take you in lots of different direction. And just again, starting small with a pilot group and starting to understand how people are using it is helping to sort of shape the thought of kind of the problem that we thought we were solving. Actually, we're solving a slightly different problem. And oh, by the way, if you're a more tenured leader, you might be working using that AI to solve slightly different problems. But if you're a more junior leader, you're looking for different types of advice. And it's just so, and I think that's the beauty of kind of starting small and having an environment where you can sort of test things out because you're
Mhm.
starting to see how diverse, what different ways people use it and different thinking and can sort of take you in different directions. It may have started out as, we need to be able to give leaders advice on, performance management when they're having difficult conversations. But people are using it to say, how do I motivate my team? Or how do I build team culture? Or, whatever it may be. So it's really cool, sort of on the ground to see how these things sort of get a life of their own and when it gets used, at the point in which it gets used.
Okay. Very cool. Like, I think that to both of your points, I think it is interesting to see, how this is evolving and even, the conversation I think is evolving every single day around how do we use this? How do we think about this? I want to go back to one of the comments you made, Sarah, is just around like the readiness of the team. How do HR leaders get the HR team specifically? So, not talking about like the rest of the business, but within HR, how do they get their HR teams ready for what's coming and how to think about AI differently?
This is something, and Sophia will talk on this at length, but this is sort
Sure.
of our where we work the best and where we come in, which is really working really closely with CHROs, because what they have today can get them part of the way there, but it's not going to get them all the way there. Today HR organizations are mainly set up with a strong center and some COEs. You work side by side with an HR tech leader who implements now we're talking SaaS, right? For the past 5 to 7 years, we've been talking SaaS. So implements cloud-based technology. When you move into an organization that wants to really transform across all of their segments, you have to start thinking almost as a product-led organization. And you don't have to become a software product organization. You don't have to work in agile sprints, but you need to start using design thinking, to Sophia's point, first. right? So user experience, customer experience actually needs to be trained into every single one of your HR constituencies, every single person who is delivering an HR service. But you also need that skill set. You need the actual UX skill set on your team. You also probably need a product visionary, someone who is thinking about all of the different pieces and disparate pieces and all of the technology and how do they come together. And then your HR tech team is no longer the like a someone who transacts for you. They need to be alongside you, if not embedded inside of HR. It depends on the type of organization you're designing that allows you to run together, right? So a product organization, product visionary is saying, okay, great, I envision this organization doing this X, different type of landscape, and that vision is informed by data from my user experience teams, as well as data from all of the HR users, as well as the business users who receive HR services. Engineering team, help us develop that. Do we build? Do we buy? Do we do a combo of both? And then the engineering team is probably going to have to transform, because in HR technology teams, in my experience anyway, they tend to have some configuration experts, maybe a couple of QA, but they don't have data architects. They likely have 1/4 of an integration specialist if you're lucky, and this world is going to call for like integrations all over the place, right? And they're not probably going to have what I would call the AI or data science chops to be able to completely manage a team or a business function that is enabled by AI. And what do I mean by that? It's really that you're going to have to do continuous audits. You're going to have to constantly check any large language models that you implement. There's a whole different skill set that goes into this. And I would say that, if you talked to me a year ago, one of my rallying cries was don't buy technology without actually looking at your organization, and don't buy technology that's promising you a savings. Because if you think you're saving 17 or 20 recruiter heads because you're buying this new technology, you're going to have to spend double that on the other side to actually implement this technology.
Right.
Sorry, Sophia, I know that you have a lot to say on this topic.
No, I mean, you've been listening. That's exactly it. I think that the skill set is different, the ways of working are different, and you can't expect either savings from your existing without investing in new, and you also can't relabel your existing team to expect them to work in a different way completely. I also think that there's a big difference between, let's just talk organization before we talk technology, but there's a big difference in working on, running your key processes in HR, running payroll, running your HR operations, servicing your clients, etc., to transforming the function and the experiences. And I think at this point in time, you need both. You need both the teams that are sort of continuously transforming and the teams that are running. I do think over time, the teams that are running are largely going to be, a lot of that's going to be automated. So then you'll have creating more capacity, or if you want, taking capacity out of the, or kind of taking costs out of the system, but it's a journey to get there. So it's like Sarah and I talk about bubble strategy, right? You almost have to like go up to go down, as you're investing in the people that are actually going to transform and actually create that automation. Then you're going to be, maybe gaining the efficiencies or whatever, creating those experiences that you want to create. But it's a journey. And I do think that HR needs to look at sort of the HR of today and then the HR of tomorrow and trying to create a path to get there, and start investing in kind of those skill sets that Sarah was mentioning, and start thinking about working differently.
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now, brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
I love that. I think you both know this. I'm a practitioner as well as a podcaster. And so, I think these topics that you're touching on and these ideas that you're touching on are I think what every HR leader is thinking about right now is, what do we have today from a talent perspective within HR, and what will I need tomorrow? And, having this conversation, I think, is so timely, because it is, whether it's AI, whatever it might be, kind of that, and I hate to use this expression because I think it's overused, but like that future of work. But truly like the future of work, not just what does it mean for the team members and the people that you are supporting, but also within HR, what is the future of work, and what is the future of what we do?
But if you think about it, yes, absolutely for HR, that's we're focusing, but also for the workforce. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like the future of work for me is really just workforce planning.
Hmm.
And if HR doesn't know how to do workforce planning, then who will? And I
Right.
think that unfortunately, HR has not focused, and God knows for whatever reasons, we've been too busy transforming ourselves or moving into new technologies or thinking about the future of the business partner. I don't know, but we have not spent enough time building workforce planning as a core core skill, as a core process that every single HR person knows how to do. I think that's the future role for HR for sure.
Mhm.
That's what the business needs right now. It needs us to be able to do the kind of future planning, future of HR, future of workforce, future of work, whatever it may be, but really thinking about what is it that is going to be done by machines? And what is it that's going to be done by humans? And what is it that we're going to be hiring for? And it's not that different from what we've been, the variables are changing slightly with machines in kind of
Mhm.
entering the picture. Contingent workers was it for a while, and is it are we going to buy? Are we going to upskill? And now we also have machines, but it's workforce planning. And I think that unfortunately, from what I've seen, HR teams are not that good or not equipped. So I think that we need to if there's one thing we have to do quickly is upskilling in how to do workforce planning for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So tell me a little bit about or let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about governance and just some of the ethical, legal, kind of the different topics that are coming up around AI, and how should HR folks be thinking about some of those pieces?
So I talk about this a lot. And I would say that my view is evolving based on um, how I think organizations might need to respond
Mhm.
relative to, say, recent executive orders, which are recommending the disparate impact actually be removed as a measure
Mhm.
for tools inside of organizations, whether it's for granting a credit card access or for hiring decisions. And that just came out, in the past couple of days. So that's certainly sort of been something that I've been thinking about. So rather than starting with governance and regulations, I want to back to trust, right? If you cannot trust that your HR organization is acting ethically and is actively making the right decisions based on data in front of them, you fundamentally are an organization that becomes an administrator. You become personnel again.
Yeah.
And trust, not to say, we are eroding so much trust in our institutions across the world right now, right? That it behooves organizations, strong leaders, strong CEOs, strong CHROs to really focus on the trust question rather than just, is it regulatorily going to get us in any trouble? And I see a lot of organizations that will bump right up against it. We'll say, okay, well, we're just shy of disturbing something from a regulatory perspective, so we're okay. That's not the right answer. Is it the right thing? There is a very clear line. What your employees expect of you is that they are given a fair shake. What your candidates expect of you is that they're given a fair shake. What your workers expect of you is that you treat them equally and fairly. It's pretty simple. And I am moving away from saying you need to comply with all of these regulations, which we all have memorized as HR professionals, and we all know sort of many of them come from the Civil Rights Act. We all understand the reasoning for why they are there, and move back to, am I building trust? And is trust a currency that is important for me inside my organization? And if so, great, then I can't make that decision. Move away from just the regulations as being your guide.
Love that. And I think that's something that we need to, well, I'll just leave it because I think you stated it perfectly. Like we just have to continue to think about how we evolve from a trust perspective and
Yeah.
from a
I,
support perspective.
I
Yeah.
will say that I think that HR professionals and legal professionals have relied very heavily on the courts to legislate trust.
Yep.
We can't rely on that anymore. I don't think you can. I don't think it's a safe thing to do. I don't think it's probably the right thing to do at the end of the day. It got a little lazy. It made lawyers a lot of money. Sorry, lawyers. Um, but that this is fundamentally who do you want to be and what kind of institution do you want to be to the people whose paychecks you write and for people who want to come work for you.
Love that.
Yeah, and I do think in Europe it's probably a little bit different right now with the sort of EU Act and kind of giving organizations a chance to respond and do the right thing. I think that the conversation has moved on from even just a year ago, where it's like, how do we trust this? And we could never put this into our organization to it's just moved so fast that people now feel like if they don't do anything, they're going to be left behind, which also, of course, opens you up to risk. So it's a really interesting time or balance right now from like going from, we can't do anything because we're too risk averse to like, oh, we have to do something because otherwise we're going to fall behind. Yeah, interesting times for sure, in this space.
Absolutely. Well, and I think exactly like you're saying, it is that balance you have to strike of how do we continue to build trust or just start building trust, whichever way, depending on where you are. And then also, how do you continue to move quickly and have that kind of agile mindset of we just need to get some stuff done and get some stuff implemented. Absolutely.
Yeah, look, nobody has the answers. Like nobody knows what the right answer is. And I think that's like the first thing. Like even us, we can advise, we can tell you what we see, we can kind of use our, at this point in time, experience in this area over the last few years, which is more than some, but we don't also have all the answers, right? So I think that's the other thing. Like it's okay to not know. It's okay to try. It's okay to kind of test and fail if you have that system in place. And I think that's important to acknowledge. Something I try to do in every one of these conversations is like nobody knows what the right answer is.
Right. Absolutely. So tell me, and I would love to hear from both of you, what is one thing that you want folks to have heard during this episode, or one thing that, is that key takeaway or key, hey, if you're an HR leader or if you're an HR practitioner, you should take from this episode?
I can maybe give. I'm not never good at the one thing, but I'll try.
None of us
I'll try.
are. I say that every time, and Jackie laughs at me because she gives usually 10 things. So yeah, if it's not one,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
allow it.
I mean, I think it's two things. It is when considering how to optimize your organization or transform your organization, it is never just technology that is going to transform it. It is people and understanding their world, so those use cases. It's business process, so understanding how work is actually happening today. And then it is technology on top of all of that, that will help to transform. So don't try to transform one pillar, transform all three, and underpin that with really strong change and adoption techniques. And then I think the other thing is just going back to the comment that I made around trust. We have, we are entering a world where the erosion of trust in who we work for, who we pay taxes to, who we vote for, is a common thing across all party lines, right? And I'm referring specifically to North America, but I know that it is definitely changing around the world right now. Organizations have an opportunity to maintain trust, and grow trust through effective HR delivery. Through HR delivery that is designed for the end user and that is consistent and transparent. They can do this in this moment. They have a moment now to actually take ownership there. And I really, really hope that we see more and more leaders stepping up to the plate and doing that.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks, Sarah. Sophia?
I can only agree with Sarah. I think that at this point in time, the one thing that I would advise HR leaders is that trust in organizations have never been lower. Engagement scores are kind of again like at the very low tail of what it's been. And I think that a lot of that is, of course, it's a turbulent time that we live in, but it's also, you keep seeing these headlines, right, around these large organizations cutting their workforces because they're implementing AI. And since AI is the topic, I would say HR has, to Sarah's point, an opportunity to actually step in and build the trust, build the engagement with their employees, and doing that by being transparent and by to say like these things are going to go away with AI. These roles may go away with AI. But here is what's not going to go away, and I'm going to give you a path and an opportunity to upskill and to get yourself on this career, because that's how we build trust, to give people the transparency, leading with transparency, and giving people opportunities. And the only way we can do that is to know which ones are going to, which skills are going to be needed and which roles are going to stay, is through workforce planning.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my one big drum that I'm trying to bang at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the one that just from what you all have shared, it's what you mentioned for Sarah, just the trust. Because I think that is, and I know you both have touched on this in all of your answers, but I think that trust piece is such a commodity that people aren't really taking advantage of in a lot of ways, because it is just there is so much so many things that people are not sure of and people are not feeling comfortable about. And the more we can build that trust and transparency, which I think goes right along with it, is going to be critical. And I think, even I'm sure you all have seen already the Ben and Jerry's news. And that, I think that's a great example of just, when a leader feels like, hey, I can't be trusted because I'm, promising things to people that I now can't deliver on because of whoever else that might have a say or, be seated at the table, that changes the dynamic quite a bit. So, where can folks get a hold of you, and what should they be reaching out to you for?
Sure. Thank you for asking the question, Katie.
Yeah.
They can get a hold of us, at either Sarah or Sophia at horizonhuman.com or at our website, horizonhuman.com, which has some direct links to interact with us. We work primarily with HR leaders, CHROs, global heads of talent acquisition at inflection points in their organization, major technology implementation, major business requirement, budget requirements, etc. That's typically when we come in, and we will come in and we will help to really design the HR strategy along with you. We are the HR strategy arm that you may not have inside your organization, or maybe you want outside insight into that. And then we can actually follow through all the way through implementation. We have a great cadre of consultants that can work with us to support implementation of whether it's technology or change or adoption or business process transformation or all three, which is what we typically recommend. And we're excited because our footprint has expanded, with Sofia being based in the EU now. And we also have some consultants in the EU, so we are expanding our footprint. But Sofia, what do you want to add?
You can, of course, find us on LinkedIn, and where we typically also will share just kind of our points of view and our reflections on what's going on. We talk to a lot of companies, we talk to a lot of tech companies, a lot of products out there as well. So again, can help leaders just kind of cut through some of that noise, if you will. So yeah, come check us out on LinkedIn, and reach out if you have any questions or want to chat more about anything that we said or disagree with anything we said. I'm always happy to have a chat.
Awesome. And I think, the piece that was, in the back of my mind as we were having this conversation is, you do have so many HR organizations that are strapped for headcount for, you were mentioning having, a data group, having, these different groups. And I'm thinking, for teams that have a smaller footprint, or being asked to have a smaller footprint, which most HR groups are, this is a great add-on that folks can reach out to you all and have that additional kind of thought, and the strategy of yesterday is not going to work for tomorrow. And I think that's the other piece that I'm really hearing throughout this conversation, is that folks need to be thinking about how to build their HR strategy, not from what we did 10, 15, or even 2 or 3 years ago, but what is it going to be kind of moving forward, and how do we do this the right way? So Sophia, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And folks, definitely reach out to them. I think, this is hopefully you've heard from this conversation that there's a lot going on within the HR space, not just in AI, but just generally. And, the more that we can equip ourselves as leaders and as practitioners to be able to support the business and move the business forward, the more valuable we'll be. And I think this is just a great example of that. So thank you both for joining us. This is Katee Van Horn from the Inclusive AF podcast. Bye.